That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so y'all know, a couple weeks ago, we released our Dynasty research book where we talked about historical hit rates for rookies, talked about where you should be taking them in your rookie drafts, among a ton of other things. Well, since then, I have been in the lab fine-tuning our rookie evaluation process. And honestly, it makes what we did last offseason look laughable. Like, I cannot believe we were able to release a Dynasty rookie draft guide last year because we have completely revamped everything. And now we actually have real rookie prospect grades that we're able to attach to these players. I've gone through and looked at every running back drafted since 2014 in Dynasty drafts in particular. We've been able to evaluate them based on our new process, fine-tune some of the different variables, and we are going to use this process to grade the players in the 2022 class and compare them historically across other players that we remember drafting in Dynasty previously to kind of get a decent gauge of where we should be looking at these running backs in terms of their value in startups, in trades, and where you should be taking them in rookie drafts. But before we get into it, go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, leave a comment letting me know why I am so stupid, because I can tell you when we get to guys like Isaiah Spiller, you are not going to like my comparisons, but I'm sitting here trying to be realistic. I'm not trying to say, oh, Rashaad White, he's going to be David Johnson. Like, who is that actually going to help out here? But please let me know your opinion in the comment section. And if you want access to our in-depth Dynasty research book, of course, you can find that down in the description of the video, whether you want to purchase that outright or you can get it a much easier, much cheaper way by going and depositing $10 on Underdog Fantasy, where they'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, and they will give you our Dynasty research book on top of that, a month-long trial to our premium Flock Locals content, including our rookie rankings and our Dynasty rankings. Just make sure you go through the link in the description and use promo code FLOCK while depositing on Underdog Fantasy, and you can get into some of those drafts with us over there, of course. That should be it. Let's dive into it. Let's bring up Breece Hall. Let's go through these boxes. There are going to be 5 main boxes that we are looking at now. I'm working on fine-tuning some of the production measurables, but my early findings on running back production is it really is not predictive. And if anything, it kind of clouds our data, where right now, I can't wait to release our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide in a couple months, because you are going to see how accurate this process is with these 5 variables. And when I've been trying to include the production statistics in there, really, it just throws things off. But we are going to be looking at 40-yard dash time, the running back's college target share, the running back's draft capital. In this instance, we're going to have to look at projected draft capital, but of course, these marks will be more accurate after the NFL draft. We are going to have to look at the running back size. And also, one thing that is very important, especially at the wide receiver position, we'll have a wide receiver version of this video, is if this player declared early or not. Now, of course, these are not weighted equally in our prospect evaluator. We are having to go through and manually determine how much a 40-yard dash time should play an impact, how much your target share should play a role in our prospect evaluation. We've already done that. We've been working on that for quite a while now. Let's dive into Breece Hall's comparisons. Now, with Breece Hall, if you're looking at the boxes he checks, 40-yard dash time, elite. He ran a 4.39 at the NFL Combine. That's not a pro day time. That is a combine time. His target share, fantastic. Clearly going to be a running back used on third downs at the NFL level. He averaged over 10% of the targets at Iowa State his junior season went to Breece Hall. On top of the rushing workload that he got, we can clearly see, hell, Breece Hall, he's a 3-down RB. Very rarely do you get a player going out and having this target share and not being able to maintain that third down role in the NFL, especially if you have the elite physical traits that Breece Hall possesses. I mean, there are only 2 other running backs that are notable in this draft class that come close to Breece Hall's target share. Breece Hall is one of the best pass-catching running backs in this draft. If we look at his BMI, he has the adequate size. He has a BMI of 30.3, completely fine. He declares early. He also has I mean, fantastic production as a workhorse running back at Iowa State. I'm not going to dive into that because based on our findings with this research, honestly, that's not nearly as predictive as some of these other measures, even though we should definitely at least acknowledge that production. Now, we are going to have to look at a range of outcomes for the draft capital we are looking at with these players. And with Breece Hall's draft capital, I am right now looking at NFL mock draft database, grinding the mocks, whatever you want to see. And he is projected to be a top 40 draft pick in a similar range where you had someone like Javonte Williams going off the board last year. But I honestly think that he could end up going in the first round. He's a better prospect than Najee Harris. He's a better prospect than Travis Etienne. I could easily see him going in round 1. So I'm going to create a pretty wide range. He can go anywhere from pick 20 overall to pick 50 overall. I think that's a fair mark to have Breece Hall. So plugging him in our little machine, plugging him in our little calculator, we are getting a prospect grade of anywhere from 25 to 26 with Breece Hall. Now, the running backs that graded higher than this as prospects coming into the NFL, I mean, you have some elite level guys. You have Saquon Barkley as the best prospect we've ever graded. You have Leonard Fournette also grading out better than this, but other running backs that had a grade of 26 coming out as prospects. You have Ezekiel Elliott. You have Jonathan Taylor, Todd Gurley, Joe Mixon, and Christian McCaffrey. And honestly, a couple of these players have strong parallels to Breece Hall. I mean, an example of this would honestly just be Ezekiel Elliott. Let's pull this up. And of course, I am not going to be ranking Breece Hall to have the same career as Zeke. I understand that is a crazy projection to have Ezekiel Elliott, one of the best rookie running backs of all time. And if we knew that Breece Hall was Zeke, Breece Hall would be the 101 in Dynasty startups right now. That's clearly not the case. But if we pull this up with Ezekiel Elliott here, he had the same exact workload essentially as Breece Hall in college. Of course, Zeke plays in a better offense. If we're looking at their BMI, pretty much identical. You have Breece Hall at 30.3. You have Ezekiel Elliott at 30.5. Looking at 40-yard dash, Breece Hall a little bit faster. Honestly, doesn't really matter that much. Breece Hall has a larger role as a receiver in his college offense. But of course, Ezekiel Elliott goes as a top 5 pick to the Dallas Cowboys, and that draft capital offsets the bump up that you've seen from Breece Hall with a couple of these other categories. And if we're going over to Joe Mixon, I like the example with everything but his production. We have to remember that Mixon at Oklahoma split the backfield with Samaje Perine. But if you're looking at the BMI 30.1, you're looking at the 40-yard dash time, he ran a 4.45 at his pro day. You're looking at the college target share 12.7, so a little bit of a better pass catcher than Breece Hall was. He goes with the 16th pick in the second round. We can assume that if it wasn't for off the field concerns with Joe Mixon back coming out of Oklahoma, you actually probably would have gone a little bit higher than that, near the range we are projecting Breece Hall to currently be drafted. So I'm looking through these boxes. There's not a single red flag on the Breece Hall profile. I was not this high on him before the NFL draft. I know y'all are tired of hearing me talk about Breece Hall already, so we're going to move on. But he is that elite level running back prospect. I mean, if you pull him up compared to some of these other guys, it is shocking to see how good Breece Hall looks. Now let's go to the running back 2 in the class. This is consensus, and I'll be the first person to admit, when we started off the offseason, I had Isaiah Spiller ahead of Kenneth Walker. I had Isaiah Spiller neck and neck with Breece Hall, and I was saying that they were the same prospect given the measurements we had at the time. But of course, when we get those actual numbers, things dramatically changed as Isaiah Spiller's the biggest loser of the offseason. We'll get to that in a second. But let's go over to Kenneth Walker. And with Kenneth Walker here, he has a lot of these same boxes checked that you see from Breece Hall. With Kenneth Walker, he goes out there, has the same exact 40-yard dash time. He's actually slightly bigger than Breece Hall if you're going to look at his BMI. And the number one red flag with this profile is going to be the college target share. Kenneth Walker simply was not used as a receiving down running back in college. Now, of course, this can change at the NFL level, but it's very hard to see that actually happen. Now, that's not to say that all of a sudden Kenneth Walker is someone you shouldn't be drafting in a PPR format at all, because if you look at these other boxes that he's going to check, and real quick, I'll tell you, for his draft capital, I think there's a very, very small chance Kenneth Walker goes round 1. I would say it's almost non-existent. Right now, Grinding the Mocks has him around pick 55. Now, it's definitely going to matter in our prospect evaluation if a running back is an early second round pick versus a late second round pick. So we're going to create a little bit of a range here to just say, hell, let's say Kenneth Walker is a second rounder, whether he's picked 33 or 64. That's going to grade him out to either a 22 or a 23 in our prospect grade model. And here with Kenneth Walker, if we look at some of the other running backs in this same range, there's some good names to be next to. You have guys like J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb. Now, the difference with a couple of these players, J.K. Dobbins, I almost think this is a 1-for-1 comparison. Kenneth Walker is slightly bigger, but outside of that, I want to say that's a 1-for-1 comparison you have with Dobbins and Kenneth Walker. If you're looking at Josh Jacobs wasn't the same athletically as Kenneth Walker, but Jacobs did manage to get the draft capital going in the first round, which definitely matters. And that's why he was able to overcome the 40-yard dash time in our model and pretty much grade out identical to Kenneth Walker. And our last example is actually going to be Nick Chubb. Now, with Nick Chubb, the thing that knocked his profile down a bit actually ended up being the fact that he had to stay 4 years at Georgia. Now, of course, with Nick Chubb, that was based on the injury. So if we were in that 2018 draft class, we could say, okay, well, yeah, with Nick Chubb, he technically has this red flag on the profile, but understanding the context behind it, it's really not a red flag at all. We should be moving Nick Chubb up a little bit. But if we're just grading them out as this prospect model stands, you have Dobbins, Jacobs, and Chubb as the comparables to Kenneth Walker. And I think if we project this out from a dynasty perspective, this would make a lot of sense. These are running backs that grade pretty much the exact same, and they are great first and second down options for their NFL offenses, but really never have shown the ability to command work on third down. Now, of course, they're not going to be Damian Harris. They are going to be able to go out there and get 2 to 3 targets a game, but there's a massive difference between getting 2 targets a game and getting 6 targets a game at the NFL level, which I don't think Kenneth Walker could ever get to, where Breece Hall could. So that's why Breece Hall's in his own tier. I think Kenneth Walker could still be a fine NFL running back. Now, this is where I know we are going to get a lot of people upset with us, because I understand it seems like we're just trying to be a little clickbaity here and say, oh yeah, you got Breece Hall going to be the next Zeke. You have Kenneth Walker going to be the next Nick Chubb. No, these are just real grades that we have. So please don't be upset with this next one when we have these real grades for Isaiah Spiller. Because if we look at this Isaiah Spiller profile, he was smaller than advertised. Of course, we know that teams like Texas A&M, they are always incentivized to make their players look better than they actually are when they register those heights, weights, and then also those reported athletic testing numbers. But he was smaller than advertised with his BMI. I believe his BMI was in the 29.4. He was slower than advertised. I can't find an official 40-yard dash time with Isaiah Spiller. I mean, it looks like the average 40-yard dash time people are settling in with is going to be about a 4.61, which I know that it seems like that's not that big of a deal, but when you combine it with the size, when you combine it with these other measures, it definitely is. So Spiller was smaller than advertised, slower than advertised, which matters at the running back position. And his projected NFL draft capital has plummeted since. I mean, at the beginning of the offseason, NFL mock drafters were projecting Isaiah Spiller to potentially be the top running back off the board. Well, now, if you go to those websites, people are projecting Isaiah Spiller to be anywhere from a late second round NFL draft pick to an early fourth round NFL draft pick. There's a wide range of outcomes, and it's because of these horrible measures that he had with his testing. Now, what is nice is he does come out of A&M early, and he is a more than capable pass-catching running back. He had almost a 10% team college target share, hovering around 9.7. But if we combine all these boxes with Isaiah Spiller, I think we have found a couple running backs that grade out almost identical. I mean, his grade right now is going to be anywhere from a 17 to an 18, possibly bumped up to a 19 or lower down to a 16, just dependent on where that draft capital lies. But there are a couple running backs that look almost identical. The first guy I want to bring up here is going to be TJ Yeldon. With TJ Yeldon, he runs a 4.61 at his 40-yard dash. He has a BMI of 29.8. The size, speed combination, almost identical there. Now, the difference is Yeldon didn't really manage to catch that many balls at Alabama. Keep in mind, he was on the Alabama roster in 2015. That's when he came out into the NFL. Who else was on that team? You got Derrick Henry on that team. You have a couple other quality college running backs. So TJ Yeldon did have a lot of competition, but nonetheless, I mean, if you're looking at this profile, it's almost identical to what you have with Isaiah Spiller. The difference is Yeldon goes in the second round, at the very top of the second round. So that's allowing him to offset the difference that Spiller may have been a better pass catcher coming out of college in our prospect model. Now, if we go over and find a couple other players that look similar, we can stay with that same team. We can go over to Kenyon Drake. Here with Drake, he had a good college target share, hovering around 10%. He was a little bit faster. The difference between these two running backs, while they grade out the same, is you actually have Kenyon Drake as a slighter running back with a BMI of 27.7. And with Drake, you've kind of seen this. Follow him into the NFL, where I understand that back in 2020 at the very end of the year, 2019 at the very end of the year, he had probably a 6-game stretch where he was a top 5 running back in fantasy, averaging over 20 touches a game. But since then, he's never really been able to have that feature down role. I think this could be almost in line with what you're going to be seeing from Isaiah Spiller at the next level. A couple other players that project to be the same with our grades. You have Sony Michel. Now with Sony Michel, the reason he's bumped down a bit is due to the fact that he had a 7.8% college target share. His BMI was hovering exactly where you have Isaiah Spiller's. His 40-yard dash time a little bit on the slower side. Now Sony Michel gets a bump up just because that draft capital. But if you take out the draft capital, then you probably prefer Spiller. But nonetheless, very, very comparable at the overall grade with the prospect level. Let's move on to our next guy. Let's go over to Amir Abdullah. Here with Amir Abdullah, pretty much a comparable across the board profile. You have a 4.60 40-yard dash, a 30.3 BMI. A college target share of 9.4%. Amir Abdullah is probably the best player to compare Isaiah Spiller to. I know not many people are going to like that. Amir Abdullah was a player drafted very highly. If we're looking historically with where he was drafted in Dynasty leagues, he was drafted in the same range as Kerryon Johnson, Carlos Hyde, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Tevin Coleman, Darrell Henderson, Samaje Perine. Amir Abdullah had the third lowest grade out of that group. But I think this is kind of who Isaiah Spiller is going to be. I think he will have a role in a committee at the NFL level. I don't think he's going to be a special player outside of possibly an injury to another running back in his backfield, vaulting him up for a short period of being able to be a 3-down running back, because he's right on that borderline with his size. Be interested to know your thoughts on that. And now let's go to our last player here that we are going to talk about today. Of course, we'll dive a lot deeper in with our draft guide coming out in a couple months. I still have a lot of research to do, but we have Rashaad White here. Now with Rashaad White, I know that there's one mark on this profile that throws everything off, and that is the usage in the receiving game that he had at Arizona State. It is unbelievable. Here, if we are pulling up his target share, he was hovering around 18 to 19%. If we go through and if we look at running backs throughout history since 2014 that have been able to get to this same mark, let's just draw the line at 18. These are the guys. Now, hear me out. Not saying he's going to turn in these players. I'll tell you who's going to turn into a second. 18%, Christian McCaffrey. Going down. 16%, Kamara. Kamara didn't get there. Going down a little bit further, 14.8%, Duke Johnson. You have Devontae Booker at 18%. You have David Johnson about 15%. You have, let's scroll down a little bit further. I know there are a couple other guys. You have Tyler Ervin at 14%. You have Josh Ferguson at 13%, and Ito Smith at 13%. There are very few running backs that we have seen have this same profile as Rashaad White as a receiving running back out of the backfield. Now, there are a couple differences between Rashaad White and those options that we mentioned with Christian McCaffrey, with Alvin Kamara, and with David Johnson. I understand those are the elite running backs, and I am not saying Rashaad White's going to be able to get there, because there are a few red flags on his profile. First thing is, with Rashaad White, this is a running back that the draft capital is supposed to be very bad. As of now, he's projected to be going in the late third to the fourth round. If he goes at the beginning of the third, bravo, he checks that box. If he can go within the top 80 picks, top 85, 86, I'll be very happy with that from Rashaad White. But a lot of mock drafters right now have him going in the fourth round. Going in the fourth round would be detrimental. He's fallen to the Nyheim Hines range there. Now, another mark that we have to be worried about is going to be the fact that he did not declare early. That's not the end of the world. David Johnson didn't either, because obviously Rashaad White wasn't a prospect coming out of high school right away that was going to command a role in an offense. He had to go to JUCO. He had a different route. So it's not the biggest red flag in the world. But also, his BMI. This is the number one thing that's holding Rashaad White back from turning into CMC, to turning into David Johnson, to turning in to Alvin Kamara, is the fact that those other running backs are simply a lot bigger than Rashaad White. Rashaad White is not going to be able to handle that same workload. It would be almost impossible to project him to. So because he does not have that size, he does not have that projected draft capital either, and he is a much older running back than CMC. CMC came out of Stanford, and honestly, if you look at his BMI, Christian McCaffrey was not supposed to be able to handle 90% of the snaps in his offense. But what happened was Christian McCaffrey was 20 years old when he came out and gained 20 pounds through the first 2 years of his NFL career. Rashaad White, that's not happening to. It just can't. He's too old. So if we look at this, I think a couple of the running backs that we mentioned are actually a lot more in line with White if we combine the target share, the draft capital, and the size. Guys like CJ Prosise, Devontae Booker, and Tyler Ervin are going to be my comparables for Rashaad White. I understand the upside. He's definitely my running back 4. But to be completely honest, with this draft class, I know a lot of people are talking about the depth. Oh my God, it's so deep. Just take as many of these guys in the 3rd, 4th round. I don't see any depth at this running back position. Guys like Brian Robinson, James Cook, Jerome Ford, Damian Pierce, Kyron Williams, Zamir White, so many of these, they are not exciting in the slightest. I know a lot of people want me to focus in on this group of players. I'll tell you right now, with these grades, their odds of hitting at the next level are slim to none. Like, it looks like if Bryce Love was in this draft class, Bryce Love would probably be the 5th running back of the board after Rashaad White. Like, there are so many players that did not pan out, that graded out very similarly to running backs after Rashaad White in this range, and very few that did. But we'll get into guys later on. I'll talk about a little bit more in depth the red flags that they have, why I'm really not drafting any running backs outside of the top 4 in this year's draft class. But of course, thank you for being a part of the flock, supporting the channel. Really hope you enjoyed this video. Really hope you got something from it. Hope you have a great day, and hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.